In just 48 hours, Head of Treasury, Professor Mthuli Ncube, will be issuing the 2020 budget for Zimbabwe. This comes against the backdrop of weakening economic fundamentals in the country. To highlight just a few, the Zimbabwean dollar has shared more than 90% of its value since its reintroduction. We've also seen a contracting economy, among other things, and of course, inflation has come in at over 353% in the month of September. Question becomes, how will the finance minister navigate these turbulent economic matters? Budget consultations have been made by parliamentarians, submissions have come through, and it is now up to the finance minister to lead the country where that particular direction is concerned. Now, to discuss issues of interest where the budget is concerned, we have paid a visit to one of the veteran economists that we have in the country, Mr. Brains Muchemwa, to get into the details of what we could look forward to in that particular budget. Please stay tuned. That's a few days from to date, and now joining me to discuss the details of that particular budget, we paid a visit to Mr. Brains Muchemwa, who is a veteran economist, to discuss the nitty-gritties of that particular budget. Mr. Muchemwa, good afternoon and welcome to Special Focus.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, viewers.
Beautiful. Now, as an icebreaker, what is your general assessment of the trends that we've seen in the Zimbabwean economy?
I think if you look at what has been happening in the economy in the last 6 months or so, the economy has been self-correcting. It has been shedding off the excesses of subsidies that had become part of the DNA of this economy, and now it's trying to find its feet again.
I realize. Now, of course, this comes just ahead of the budget, which the finance minister will release just a few days from now, particularly on Thursday, which is 2 days exactly from today. What is your comment on the last year's budget theme, austerity? What is your comment where that is concerned? And do you feel that austerity achieved the intended mission that the minister had?
So when you look at the austerity program by the minister, I think we need to look at it from a broad spectrum. The first issue is, was it necessary? Did this economy need austerity measures in the first place? And if so, was it implemented the right way? And if it was implemented the right way, was it abandoned at the right time, or had it achieved its objectives at the time that the minister then declared that we were out of the austerity program? So I'll look at those issues. Did this economy need austerity measures? Definitely we needed austerity measures, serious austerity measures. Why do I say that? For many years, this economy has suffered from excessive budget deficits, fiscal budget deficits, whose impact and effect on the economy has largely been destabilizing. It has always been the source of the high inflation. It has always been the source of the exchange rate depreciation, and because of all that, this economy has always had it difficult to grow and to sustain growth and create jobs and preserve income. So definitely the austerity program was so much needed to try and put government expenditure within the context of its ability to generate revenue. So that's the first issue. The second issue now on, I'm looking at, did we achieve what the austerity program wanted to achieve in the first place? To be honest with you, we didn't. Number one, remember the budget for 2019, the minister targeted 10% year-on-year inflation as the year-end inflation by December. You are so sure that we've missed that by a huge margin. Probably inflation is now around 500%. So when you look at 10% and 500, definitely we've missed significantly on that. If you look at the exchange rate, the government is thinking is that the exchange rate should be within the range of 1:6. Now we are 1:15, 1:20, and by December it could be anything else. So definitely we have missed on all those. So, but were they part of the austerity program? The austerity program was to manage government expenditure and manage the twin deficits, right? But managing the twin deficits was not an end in itself. It was to try and target inflation and stabilize the exchange rate. So from that perspective, I can assure you, or I can be confident that indeed the austerity program has failed to achieve the objectives of stabilizing the inflation and stabilizing the exchange rate. So the last issue, the minister has declared that we are now out of the austerity program. Was it too soon, or was it at the right time? I believe that he abandoned it too soon. It had not really achieved much in terms of the intended objectives. And I strongly believe that more than anything else, the minister understands that the austerity program has not achieved anything, but it's more of the political pressure, which I believe he is failing now to navigate and manage, and to the extent that he then said, okay, I think we've now achieved, now away with the austerity program.
But as a policy, could we not say that, on the other hand, austerity was also working against the economy in terms of economic growth? Look at how the economy has shrunk during the period of austerity. Is it maybe not an initiative to try and lessen the burden on the masses, make the economy a little bit more productive and get us on a different standing altogether?
When you look at just the period before the introduction of the austerity program, or if you just look at that phase, we were running an economy that was riddled with subsidies. Government was printing money to subsidize bread, fuel, everything, almost everything that you were consuming, consumer goods, were all subsidized by the government. Whether we had implemented austerity measures or not, this economy would have just contracted either way. So it's not exactly that is the austerity measures that then caused the economy to contract. The economy was just going to contract anyway, whether we had introduced an austerity measures or we had not introduced, because the government had now started to win off the economy from the subsidies. And in any case, remember what was then happening. We're printing a lot of broad money supply was growing significantly in this market, excessively so, on account of the subsidies that were being pumped into the market. And the exchange rate was no longer holding. The inflation that we had the CPI, which was low in courts, because all the key items on the CPI were being subsidized by the government. But the subsidies were not coming from surpluses that were being generated from the fiscal front, but government was just busy just issuing treasury bills and printing money. So either way, it was going to implode, with or without austerity. So my thinking is that it's not that the austerity measures then caused the economy to contract. It was a natural progression of the economy.
Fair enough.
And the only thing that the minister did then by introducing the austerity measures was to try and vaccinate the economy against hyperinflation. If we had continued printing money the way we were doing then, surely we would have decimated this economy much further and would probably have abandoned this local currency a long time ago.
Now, with the 2020 budget now on the table, set to be issued by the finance minister, what key issues do you think the minister needs to look at, and perhaps a theme that you would say would be the appropriate one for Zimbabwe at this particular moment?
In my opinion, this is not the time to think of growing the economy. This is not the time to be ambitious. I think the most important thing right now is to stop the bleeding and to stabilize the economy. And I think what is more important for the government is to understand that going forward, it's not going to be easy to grow the Zimbabwean economy. It's not going to be easy to eradicate poverty quickly. It's not going to be easy to create jobs and sustain incomes, right? The most important aspect now is that disposable incomes when you look at disposable incomes in the market, you find that they are at their lowest probably post-dollarization right now. Inflation is still increasing, notwithstanding, of course, us not reporting it. The exchange rate is not as stable as you would want it to be. So the most important thing, therefore, going forward is for the Minister of Finance to look at ways of stabilizing the exchange rate and managing inflation. But how would he manage inflation? He needs to focus on maintaining a reasonable budget balance, so that we don't get into huge budget deficits that would then cause that we print more money to sustain government expenditure and in the process weaken the domestic economy.
Okay. last year we saw certain ministries receiving huge amounts of money, and the mix in terms of the deployment of the funds raised eyebrows in the process. What form of allocations do you think the minister needs to balance in terms of the matrix there? Agriculture, should we continue on that command agriculture trajectory? How exactly should we manage it? And should the Ministry of Defense continue to receive as much? Should the police continue to be receiving such huge amounts of money?
Okay, that's a tricky question. But even yourself, I think you'll find it difficult to balance these competing interests. But my thinking would be informed by the state of the economy, in particular, by the fact that when government is there, or the role of the government is to try and preserve, in this context, to preserve the incomes, right, and provide a platform for the ordinary people to just have a reasonable lifestyle. So when you look at the fact that disposable incomes are at their lowest right now, people cannot afford basics like the provision of health services, for example, is now beyond the reach of many, almost of everyone. You go to a hospital, you can't even find syringes, you can't find drip, you can't find. So all those issues are the issues which I believe should be at the forefront when it comes to the government trying to address the challenges and allocating the resources for 2019. The government should spend more money on health care, should spend more money on education, the social aspect, the very aspect that just make us who we are, that would just be able to preserve life. All the other ministries, in my opinion, they're important. Their role is quite important, but at the moment, because we've got a huge breakdown in the social service ministries, those are the ones that should get the immediate focus. Agriculture, for example, we have spoken about agriculture many years in this country. We've subsidized agriculture many years to no avail. The benefits have not been seen by anyone. In fact, by subsidizing agriculture and creating unnecessary broad money supply in the economy, we've actually weakened the whole economy, to the extent that the very people that we thought we would be trying to protect by bringing subsidies into agriculture become the most vulnerable. So in my opinion, funding agriculture should not be the role of the government. The government should not even be in the business of guaranteeing loans that are given to those in agriculture. If at all there is need for any subsidies, they should come at the output level. Government should actually subsidize or should incentivize agriculture at the output for those that would have produced, not for people that want to start to get into agriculture. That model has failed, and it doesn't seem to work. It's not working. It has created inflation. It has created a lot of headaches, even for the government itself. Now they've changed the name. It's no longer command. It's now smart agriculture, whatever it is. They are seeing that the dynamics are not really coming together.
Fair enough. Now, to move on to another matter within the same bracket, there is the issue of TBs. Government is back on the open market, and as of today, we can say over the past 3 months, government has floated TBs to the tune of just below $1 billion, $940 million to be precise. What is your comment on that particular development?
Myself, as long as government is borrowing in its normal course of doing business, getting into the market, financial markets, issuing debt instruments, it's fine. It's prudent. As long as it's prudent, and as long as it's within the confines of a reasonable deficit, it's fine. It's better than the Reserve Bank dishing money to the government through the overdraft window. So, in my opinion, that is definitely much a better way of raising government financing. In any case, the fact that they are getting into the market to look for money shows that indeed we have not necessarily been getting the best out of the austerity program. That should have actually allowed the government, or that should have resulted in the government balancing its books, so to say.
But we've seen these TBs proving to be toxic in the past. We've seen TBs result in a ballooning money supply, which pretty much did not do us good in as far as the overall economy is concerned. Do we not have maybe those concerns or fears where that is concerned?
So when you look at those treasury bills that caused that havoc in the market, they were not the open market treasury bills that you see today that are being where the government is coming into the market to borrow. Those were treasury bills that were issued by the government for debt assumption, for financing other projects without necessarily mopping the money that already exists in the economy. So this was new money that was being created. But the difference now is that the government is actually getting into the market to get your money and my money, my savings. This is saving, everyone's savings, those that have excess savings or that have access to their requirements, and then borrowing that. It's totally different from the other instances where the government would just issue a treasury bill from nowhere, which treasury bill would then whose issuance would be just synonymous to printing money, because the holder of that treasury bill would actually then have purchasing power all of a sudden and can get into the market, discount it, get cash, and by such doing would have actually increased the stock of money supply in the economy. So this is slightly different. But when the government is doing that, which you're talking about, it's something that you would not know. You would not know. So once you are knowing that they've issued 940, you should thank God that at least you know. When they issue those treasury bills, no one would know. What you just start seeing is money supply ballooning in the market. And when you then start looking at bank balances, that's when you start seeing, that the TBs are increasing in the market.
Okay. And of course, onto the topical matters to do with corruption. Transparency International has estimated before that Zimbabwe is losing about $1 billion to corruption. And we've seen recent arrests of particular ministers within government. What is your comment where that is concerned?
Look, I think it's everyone's desire that this country be cleansed of corruption and the corrupt activities that have got a huge implicit, or that have got an impact on the ability of this country to attract investment and even to preserve the existing domestic investment. So definitely it's a good move by the government, and we hope that it sends the right signals and we continue to move towards the right direction. Definitely corruption is a big issue in this country, and when you look at most of these issues, some of them, even the issues to do with the exchange rate manipulation, the issues of inflation, etc., one way or the other, you might actually be able to link them back to corruption, maybe at the point of issuing the monetary stock itself or whatever it is. You see, government contracts, you see, that would not have been given to deserving people, etc. So we definitely need to manage the issue of corruption. It would definitely have a huge impact on managing and stabilizing the economy.
But do you feel government is doing enough?
I think at the moment, look, when you look at what has been happening of lately, where sitting ministers and the so-called big fish are being called to account, these are things that we had never seen in this country before. These are things that people would just talk about, in whispers, but you would never see them happening. You see, but now you can see it's happening, and surely we should be able to commend the government. They are doing its best. Probably it's now an issue of the technicalities. Most of these crimes, unfortunately, they are financial in nature. I think what is needed is a reorientation of the prosecutors. The prosecutors, you need the government, I think, needs to understand that. For example, I'll give you an example. So you've got an ordinary prosecutor who has no idea about treasury bills, how they are discounted and so on, and how they are sold, etc., trying to prosecute a case with regards the selling or otherwise of a treasury bill. That is where the challenges now start, you see. And that's explained to some extent why white-collar crime becomes a bit difficult to nail in this country, because we might just not be so prepared in terms of the prosecution arm of the government. And I think it's one place where the government now needs to actually get into the financial services sector, for example, find the best brains in terms of people that understand how these things happen. You see, you can argue about the discount rates. We can argue about the discount rates today and how and to what extent it can probably constitute a crime. if you would have sold it on a treasury bill on the secondary market. But surely, for someone who has no idea what a treasury bill is, what a discount rate is, and how you discount a fixed asset security, for example, and all that, look, sometimes it becomes difficult now to successfully prosecute those cases. And it's an issue where the government really needs to sit down and understand that they don't have capacity and they have to create the capacity.
Interesting. And lastly, what can we do to raise the amount of foreign direct investment that comes into Zimbabwe? Last year we hit a figure of about $749 million against a prior year's figure that was in the 350 million region. What can we do to increase the amount of foreign direct investment inflows into Zimbabwe?
I think what we now, for now, I think the focus should not be on foreign direct investment. I think we spend a lot of time as an economy focusing on the wrong things. This country does not need to worry about foreign direct investment. What is more important now is to focus on the domestic investment. Create the right environment for the domestic investors to invest and expand and create jobs. Once that is done, foreign investment will come on its own. You cannot be going out there looking for foreign direct investment when you can't even look after the domestic environment, domestic investment. So that focus, I think, is a focus that we've had for many years, and it's a focus which I think has been misleading us as a country. You wouldn't be called to invest in a country where the invested companies are already losing capital, they are losing their balances to inflation, exchange rate is not stable, they are losing working capital. You can go anywhere else in the world and try and bring people in, but they will not come. The most important thing is never to focus on foreign investment at this point in time. Stabilize the environment, create an environment that will allow the foreign investors to actually get keen by themselves. Say, I think there is money to be made in Zimbabwe, and once we do that, it will be much easier then to go to them and invite them to come in.